Hi, I'm Gidon from technologyman.com. I've had the latest iPhone from Apple for almost 3 months now, so plenty of time to determine whether it's worth its £1,000 or $1,000 price tag, to me at least. The iPhone X has a new 5.8-inch HDR OLED screen, face recognition, is waterproof to IP67, has a wide angle and short telephoto lens, both with image stabilisation. It supports wireless charging and has the latest and greatest A11 bionic processor. So let's take a closer look. The packaging is up to Apple's usual high standards, but the supplied accessories are disappointing. As discussed in my earlier video on fast charging, Apple still only supply the slow 1A charger, so despite the iPhone X being one of their first generation of phones to support fast and wireless charging, you'll have to purchase both separately. At first glance it may look like you get a set of wireless headphones. That's just clever packaging and wishful thinking. Included are the standard Apple AirPods with a lightning connector, and you also get a lightning to 3.5mm adapter so you can connect any set of headphones or indeed a microphone. The phone itself is beautifully designed and the build quality is excellent. It's small compared to my iPhone 6 Plus and it feels a little heavier, but the weight is about the same, it's just a bit denser. It's slippery in the hand. I prefer to use it with an Apple leather case and for added security an Anchor glass screen protector. Although billed as the biggest iPhone screen, the 5.8-inch display is narrower and has a little less surface area than the iPhone 8 Plus and all previous Plus models for that matter. It also has the well-documented notch for the Face ID camera, which isn't a problem in portrait mode but intrusive in landscape mode. The new 18.5:9 ratio means that standard 16:9 YouTube videos will have significant black bars either side in landscape mode, although you can pinch the screen to zoom to fill the content. This will lose some of the top and bottom of the video and will highlight the Face ID notch, but I generally find it a worthwhile compromise. But the screen with its new OLED display technology with a 1:1 contrast ratio does look superb, the best I've seen on any iPhone yet. Not that I've ever been at all disappointed with any iPhone display. With a brightness of 625 candela per square metre, the phone is usable in the brightest sunlight, we get in the UK at least. The Super Retina HD display with 458 ppi is higher than any other iPhone, but I doubt you'll notice any difference against the next best 401 ppi of the other iPhones. There's also HDR support, which is the next big thing, but there's little content available to showcase this technology, and the physical size of the screen wouldn't do it much justice anyway. The new True Tone feature adjusts the white balance of the display based on ambient lighting. I leave it switched on, and it does make a small difference, but it's not a huge selling point for me. A lot has been made of Face ID, and it does work really well. Setup is much quicker than the fingerprint reader it replaced, and it's far more reliable than my previous 6 Plus's fingerprint reader, although that was a few generations old. There are a couple of frustrations with it. It doesn't work in landscape mode, and if the phone is on your desk, say, you have to awkwardly position your head over the phone to unlock it or pick it up. It does work in the dark though. Gestures are probably the most significant change from older iPhones. Without a home button, Apple has had to completely rethink how you navigate the phone. It does take some getting used to, but in less than 24 hours, I was absent-mindedly attempting similar gestures on other devices without gesture support. You don't need to wait for the unlock icon to appear, just tap on the screen and swipe up to get to the home screen. This gesture will always get you back to the home screen. Swipe from the right of the notch to get to the control center, and from the left of the notch to get to notifications. Swipe up and hold your finger on the screen to get to the multitasking screen, and press and hold on any open app to then close the app by swiping up. The most useful gesture is swiping right across the bottom of the screen to switch to the most recently open app. You can continue swiping to the right to open other previously opened apps, and then you can swipe left and right to go back and forth. But with no home or power button, to turn off the phone or take a screenshot seems a little more clumsy than it should be. You take a screenshot by pressing the side button and volume up button, but this is so easy to do accidentally that my camera roll is littered with random screenshots. To turn the phone off, you need to press and hold the side button and either the volume up or down button, which is easy to forget. The iPhone X has Apple's latest A11 bionic processor and 3GB of RAM and is very fast, so much so that it makes even my fairly high-end video editing and gaming computer feel relatively slow. Opening a web browser and searching all happens as quickly as you can type. I don't do much gaming on my phone, but Grid Auto Sport, which is optimised for the iPhone X, looks amazing. Geekbench, which measures the performance of the processor, only supports my real-use experiences. The single core score of over 4000 is 20% faster than the previous generation of iPhones and 3 times faster than my old iPhone 6 Plus. To put this in context, my i7 desktop computer with 24GB of RAM gets a similar score. Battery life is never a particularly strong point of iPhones, but the 2716 mAh battery usually leaves me between 20 and 50% at the end of the day, which is similar to my 6 Plus when it was new. You have to swipe down right of the notch to now see the battery percentage, which is a minor inconvenience. I've done a separate video on charging the latest generation of iPhones, so I'd suggest taking a look at that. But in short, the iPhone X supports fast charging. So with any charger that supports the USB power delivery standard, including the Apple 29 watt charger and Anker's variant, together with an Apple USB Type-C to Lightning cable, you can charge the iPhone X from completely flat to 47% in only 30 minutes. It's also possible to use any widely available and relatively cheap Qi charger to wirelessly charge the iPhone X. Of the ones I tested, my preference was the RAV Power charging stand. The built-in stereo speakers sound good and are louder than previous models, which is handy when you don't want to plug in headphones. The 12 megapixel dual lens camera was my real draw to the iPhone X. The Samsung Note was its closest rival with a similar two lens setup. The Google Pixel 2 and the Samsung S8 have excellent image quality but only a single wide-angle lens. The iPhone X has a standard 28mm wide-angle lens and a 52mm short telephoto lens, both in 35mm equivalent terms. Unique to the X, both of these lenses have image stabilisation built in. The iPhone 8 Plus only has image stabilisation on its wide-angle lens. The telephoto lens is also brighter at f2.4 versus f2.8 on the 8 Plus. The wide-angle lens is f1.8 on all iPhone models since the iPhone 7. This all means that the iPhone X should be able to take better photos when light levels drop. The small sensors in smartphones need as much light as possible even with their clever processing. The dual camera system also enables the phone's portrait mode, which uses the offset distance between both its lenses and the resulting parallax differences to calculate a depth map, thus allowing the background of portrait shots to be blurred, something that's not possible optically with the tiny sensors in smartphones. The front camera on the iPhone X is 7 megapixels with an f2.2 aperture, but this true depth camera system, as Apple calls it, used for Face ID, also adds an infrared emitter. Unique to the iPhone X, this gives the front-facing camera portrait mode too. Apple's camera app is quite basic, but it's easy access from a hard press on the camera icon or a swipe from the right of the lock screen. It's still a little awkward and it takes longer than it should to open. I would like to be able to program the Siri button to activate the camera, but that's not possible at the moment. There's no manual controls or raw shooting with the default camera app, but you can switch between the wide and short telephoto modes easily. I've collected a number of third-party camera apps over the years which do have manual controls and support RAW, such as Camera Plus, Pro Camera, Camera Pixels and Lightroom Mobile to name a few. But since you can't change the default app and the third-party apps won't record live photos, I find myself using Apple's app probably 90% of the time. By default, the iPhone X uses the new HEIC and HEVC format for photos and videos, respectively, with their improved compression algorithms. I've discussed this in more detail in my article on backing up your iPhone photos. Photos taken with a wide-angle lens in good light are excellent and a match for my Panasonic G80 interchangeable lens camera in many ways. As light levels drop, the photos still look good on the iPhone screen and only close inspection reveals noise and artifacts. I do, however, find the telephoto lens a little disappointing. Using the default app, even if you select the 2x zoom, the camera will frequently still use the wide-angle camera and then apply a destructive 2x digital zoom to the image. The app doesn't inform you of this, but pulling up the EXIF data confirms it. Apple is intelligently determining that in certain situations light levels are insufficient for the less bright telephoto lens and you'd be better off with the brighter wide-angle lens and a digital zoom. If you want more control, you need to again use one of the third-party apps which force the zoom level you have selected. I would prefer the app just told you it couldn't enable a 2x zoom, so I could choose to crop after the fact and not lose any quality. Video quality is also impressive with good lighting. By default, the camera records at 1080p with 30 frames per second. There's no way to change this in the camera app. You need to go into Settings, Camera, Record Video. I'd recommend changing this to at least 1080p 60 frames per second for smoother motion. You can go all the way to 4K 60 frames per second with the storage requirements, even with the new HEVC H.265 base compression might persuade you otherwise. I reserve the 4K 60 frames per second mode for special occasions and when I might want to grab an 8 megapixel still from the video. Image stabilisation works well, especially for video. Video footage looks very smooth, almost like it's been taken with a gimbal. For images, I didn't notice a huge difference over my iPhone 6 Plus. Slow-mo video is another feature that puts most cameras to shame. The iPhone X will shoot slow-mo up to 1080p at 240 frames per second. Again, you'll need good lighting for the better results and lots of storage space. HDR or High Dynamic Range mode is similar to the previous models. I like to change the default automatic mode so that I can at least see whether I'm shooting HDR or not. HDR images are very good if perhaps a little conservative, but there's nothing stopping you using a third-party HDR app like Pro HDRX, or shooting a bracketed exposure with something like Camera Pixels and creating your own HDR compositions later. I didn't expect an awful lot from portrait mode, but it's a lot better than I expected, and I imagine we'll only see this get better and more sophisticated as time goes on. If you look closely, you will see the depth map isn't perfect, but for sharing and small prints, I doubt anyone will notice. It is quite fussy about where the subject is, but with a little care you can normally get good results, and you have the option to turn off the portrait mode after you've taken the photo anyway. I'm always slightly torn between portrait mode and standard live photo mode taking pictures of my children. The additional live photo video clip is arguably of greater value to me than a background blur. Portrait mode with the front camera doesn't work quite as well as the rear camera, but it is nice to have. There are also the portrait lighting modes, which are fun to play with, but I don't find them reliable enough yet to be of true value. They are listed as a beta feature by Apple, so I expect they will only get better. They can be enabled after you've taken the shot, so you can always see if they offer the desired effect at a later stage. There's little doubt that this is the best iPhone yet, and it should be at £1,000 or $1,000 for the base 64GB model. There are a few annoyances. The notch is hard to ignore in landscape mode, and the telephoto lens is not as useful as I'd hoped. But the screen is fantastic, gesture control is mostly very well thought out, and image quality in both photo and video modes just gets better and better. If you're not concerned with the dual lens and have no allegiance to Apple, then the Samsung S8 or the Google Pixel 2 at around half the price make more sense. If you like the idea of the dual lens and want an Apple phone, the iPhone 7 Plus is the best value option at the moment. There's no Face ID or wireless charging, the telephoto lens is slightly lacking compared to the iPhone 10, and it has a previous generation processor, but you'll save yourself over £300. So I hope you found the video useful. Please like and subscribe if you did, it really helps. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks very much for watching.